The Galactic Council's emergency session had been called for the third time this cycle, and Ambassador Zexhai could feel the familiar weight of dread settling into his chitinous shell. The holographic display in the center of the vast chamber showed the latest reports from the Outer Rim territories, each one more concerning than the last. The Terran Republic has submitted another colonization request, announced High Chancellor Vorth, her crystalline voice echoing through the chamber. This time for the Kepler 442 system. A collective shudder rippled through the assembled delegates. Kepler 442 was known throughout the galaxy as one of the most hostile systems ever cataloged. Its primary world, designated as a Class XI Deathworld, was home to the most terrifying apex predator known to galactic civilization, the Shadow Maw. Zexhai's three eyes focused on the data streaming across his personal display. The Shadow Maw stood nearly 4 meters tall, possessed razor-sharp claws capable of slicing through reinforced durasteel, and moved with a speed that defied its massive size. Its hide was virtually impervious to standard plasma weapons, and its intelligence was disturbingly high. Most disturbing of all, it seemed to take pleasure in hunting sentient beings. Surely the humans cannot be serious about this request, interjected Delegate Pern from the Hegemony Worlds. No species has ever successfully established a permanent settlement on a world inhabited by Shadow Maws. The last attempt by the Corvin expedition resulted in complete annihilation within 6 standard days. The Chancellor's light dimmed slightly, indicating her concern. The humans have been remarkably persistent in their expansion efforts. They have already colonized 17 worlds that we classified as uninhabitable. Perhaps they are unaware of the true danger posed by the Shadow Maws. Ambassador Zexhai accessed his files on human military capabilities. Despite their recent admission to the Galactic Council, humans had proven to be surprisingly effective warriors. Their unconventional tactics and apparent disregard for personal safety had earned them a grudging respect among the more militaristic species. However, facing a Shadow Maw was an entirely different matter. "I propose we grant their request," Zexhai said, causing several delegates to turn their attention toward him in surprise. The humans have consistently demonstrated an ability to overcome challenges that would destroy other species. If they fail, we will have definitive proof that even the most aggressive species cannot survive on Shadow Maw worlds. If they succeed, we will gain valuable data on how to combat these creatures. The debate continued for several hours, but eventually, the Council reached a consensus. The human colonization request would be approved, though with extensive documentation requirements and monitoring protocols. They would be required to transmit daily status reports and allow Council observation vessels to maintain a safe distance from the system. 3 days later, the human colony ship New Horizon entered the Kepler 442 system, accompanied by a small fleet of support vessels. Council observers watched through long-range sensors as the humans began their standard orbital survey procedures. The planet below appeared deceptively peaceful, its dense forests and vast oceans giving no hint of the deadly predators lurking within. Dr. Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, reviewing the latest sensor data with her team. As the mission's chief xenobiologist, she was responsible for cataloging and assessing all potential threats to the colonists. The Council's warnings about the Shadow Maws had been noted, but the human leadership had faced similar warnings about every world they had attempted to colonize. Initial scans show approximately 200 large predator signatures scattered across the main continent, reported Lieutenant Morrison from the tactical station. They appear to be solitary hunters, which should make avoidance easier during the initial settlement phase. Captain Martinez nodded thoughtfully. "Dr. Chun, what's your assessment of the threat level?" Sarah pulled up the Galactic Council's files on the Shadow Maws, comparing them to similar predators they had encountered on other worlds. The specifications are certainly impressive, but nothing we haven't dealt with before. The Bone Devils on New Montana were arguably more dangerous, and we've had a thriving colony there for 8 years now. The crew began final preparations for planetary descent. Standard protocol called for the establishment of a secure perimeter around the landing site, followed by the gradual expansion of the colony's safe zone. Automated defense systems will be deployed first, followed by scouting teams equipped with the latest in human military technology. What the humans didn't know, and what the Galactic Council had failed to mention in their warnings, was that the Shadowmaws possessed an ability that transcended their already formidable physical capabilities. They could sense the fear and aggression of other sentient beings, using these emotions to track their prey across vast distances. Every species that had attempted to settle on Shadowmaw worlds had broadcast their terror like a beacon, drawing the predators directly to their colonies. As the first human shuttles broke through the planet's atmosphere, the Shadowmaws began to stir from their territorial hunting grounds. Ancient instincts activated as they detected the presence of new potential prey. But something was different this time. The usual flood of fear and desperation that accompanied the arrival of galactic colonists was notably absent. Instead, the humans radiated something else entirely: curiosity, determination, and an odd sense of excitement that the Shadowmaws had never encountered before. The great predators paused in their advance, uncertain how to interpret these strange new emotions. For the first time in their evolutionary history, they experienced something they had never known: hesitation. The human landing zone was established without incident, their prefabricated structures assembled with military precision. Perimeter defenses were activated, and scouting teams began their initial exploration of the surrounding terrain. Dr. Chun led the first xenobiological survey, her team equipped with tranquilizer weapons and capture nets rather than the lethal armaments that other species typically employed. Remember, our primary objective is observation and documentation, she reminded her team as they moved through the dense forest. These creatures are apex predators on their home world. We need to understand their behavior patterns before we can develop appropriate coexistence strategies. Private Jackson raised his hand from his position at point. Dr. Chun, are we sure that coexistence is possible with these things? The Council's files make them sound pretty hostile. Sarah smiled, adjusting her field scanner to detect large life forms. Every species we've encountered has been labeled as extremely hostile by the Council at first contact. The key is understanding their motivations and territorial behavior. Most predators only attack when they feel threatened or when they're hunting for food. If we can establish clear boundaries and avoid interfering with their natural hunting patterns, we should be able to share this world peacefully. Unknown to the human team, they were already being observed. 3 Shadowmaws had detected their approach and moved to intercept, following hunting patterns that had been refined over millions of years of evolution. But as they drew closer to the humans, something unprecedented occurred. The lead Shadowmaw, an ancient female known to her kind as the Deathbringer, suddenly stopped her advance. Her enhanced senses, designed to detect fear and aggression in potential prey, were instead picking up emotions she couldn't categorize. The humans showed no signs of the terror that usually preceded a hunt. Instead, they seemed genuinely interested in their surroundings, even excited by the possibility of encountering new life forms. More disturbing still, the human scent carried undertones that triggered deep, primal memories buried in the Shadowmaw's genetic code. It was a scent that spoke of apex predators, of creatures that sat at the very top of their food chain. But that was impossible. The humans were small, soft creatures with no visible claws or natural weapons. They couldn't possibly be dangerous. Yet every instinct the Deathbringer possessed was screaming warnings. She had survived for over 2 centuries by trusting those instincts, and they had never led her astray before. The other Shadowmaws looked to her for guidance, their own senses detecting the same confusing signals. Dr. Chin's scanner suddenly lit up with proximity alerts. "Contact," she announced quietly to her team. 3 large signatures, approximately 50 meters northeast of our position. They've stopped moving. The team immediately shifted into observation mode, their training taking over as they prepared to make first contact with one of the galaxy's most feared predators. Dr. Chun activated her recording equipment, knowing that whatever happened next would be studied by xenobiologists across the galaxy for decades to come. What none of them realized was that they were about to shatter every assumption the Galactic Council had made about both humans and shadow moths. The encounter that followed would force the galaxy to reconsider everything they thought they knew about predator-prey relationships and the true nature of the species they had so reluctantly admitted to their cosmic community. The Deathbringer crouched in the dense undergrowth, her massive form perfectly still as she observed the strange creatures that had invaded her territory. Her two companions, younger males she had allowed to follow her hunt, waited for her signal to attack. But the signal never came. Dr. Chin slowly approached the tree line where her scanner indicated the shadow moths were hiding. Her team spread out behind her in a standard observation formation, their tranquilizer weapons ready, but not raised. She had studied the available footage of shadow moths from previous encounters, but seeing one in person would provide invaluable behavioral data. "Movement in the ferns ahead," whispered Sergeant Rodriguez through the comm system. "I count at least 2, possibly 3 individuals." Sarah nodded, her excitement growing despite the obvious danger. "Remember, we're not here as invaders or hunters. We're simply neighbors trying to understand each other. Keep your weapons lowered and avoid direct eye contact until we can assess their threat posture." The Deathbringer's enhanced hearing picked up every word of the human conversation, and her confusion deepened. These creatures spoke of understanding and coexistence, concepts that no prey species had ever expressed before encountering her kind. Every previous first contact had involved screaming, running, or desperate attempts at violence. These humans seemed almost respectful. A sudden rustling in the nearby bushes announced the arrival of another presence. The younger of the 2 male shadow moths, known as the Night Stalker, had grown impatient with the Deathbringer's hesitation. He emerged from cover with a thunderous roar, his 4-meter frame rising to its full height as he prepared to charge the human team. The human's reaction was immediate, but not at all what the shadow moths expected. Instead of fleeing in terror or opening fire, Dr. Chin raised her hand in a clear stop signal to her team while taking a single step forward. "Hold positions," she said calmly, her voice carrying no trace of fear. "This is a territorial display. He's trying to determine if we're a threat to his hunting grounds." The Night Stalker paused mid-charge, confused by the lack of fear response. His roar should have sent any intelligent creature running for safety, but these humans remained exactly where they were, watching him with what appeared to be scientific interest. Dr. Chin slowly reached into her pack and retrieved a small device. "I'm going to try something," she announced to her team. "According to the council files, shadow moths have enhanced hearing. I want to test their cognitive capacity." She activated the device, which began broadcasting a series of mathematical sequences in audio form. Prime numbers followed by simple addition and multiplication tables, then more complex patterns. It was a standard first contact protocol that had proven effective with numerous intelligent species. The Night Stalker's head tilted to one side as he processed the strange sounds. His species had evolved beyond the need for complex communication, relying instead on their ability to sense emotions and intentions directly. But the patterns coming from a small device were intriguing, almost like a puzzle waiting to be solved. After several minutes of listening, the Night Stalker began to respond. His deep, rumbling vocalizations matched the mathematical patterns with surprising accuracy, even adding his own variations to the sequences. The other 2 shadow moths emerged from hiding, drawn by their companions' unusual behavior. Dr. Chin's eyes widened with amazement. "They're not just predators," she whispered to her team. "They're genuinely intelligent. Look at the complexity of those vocal patterns." The Deathbringer stepped forward, her ancient mind racing to understand this unprecedented situation. In all her years of hunting, she had never encountered prey that attempted to communicate rather than simply survive. These humans were challenging every assumption she held about the natural order of her world. Sergeant Rodriguez shifted nervously as the 3 massive predators drew closer. "Dr. Chun, should we be concerned that they're not running away from us?" Sarah looked up from her recording equipment, her face showing a mixture of excitement and dawning realization. Sergeant, I don't think they're supposed to be running away from us. I think we've got this backwards. She gestured toward the Shadow Maws, who were now arranged in a rough semicircle around the human team. Their posture was alert, but not aggressive, more like curious observers than active hunters. Look at their body language. These aren't the movements of predators preparing to attack. They're behaving like prey animals, trying to assess a potential threat. The implications of her observation sent shockwaves through the team. If the galaxy's most feared apex predators were treating humans as potential threats rather than potential meals, what did that say about humanity's position in the galactic ecosystem? Private Jackson lowered his tranquilizer rifle completely. Ma'am, are you saying these things are actually afraid of us? Before Dr. Chun could respond, her comm unit crackled with an urgent transmission from orbit. Ground team, this is New Horizon. We're picking up massive movement signatures across the continent. It looks like every shadow on the planet is converging on your position. Captain Martinez's voice cut through the static. Dr. Chun, what's your status down there? Do you need immediate extraction? Sarah looked around at the three Shadow Maws, who had ceased their mathematical communication and were now watching her intently. Their enhanced senses had undoubtedly detected the approaching members of their species, but none of them showed any signs of preparing for a coordinated attack. Negative on extraction, Captain, she replied. I think we're witnessing something unprecedented here. The Shadow Maws aren't gathering to hunt us. They're gathering to, well, I'm not sure what they're doing, but it's not hostile. The Deathbringer's consciousness was flooded with chemical signals from her approaching kin. Fear, confusion, and uncertainty dominated the emotional landscape in a way she had never experienced before. The arrival of these humans had fundamentally disrupted the Shadow Maws' understanding of their role as the dominant species on their world. As the first of the approaching Shadow Maws began to appear at the edge of the clearing, Dr. Chun made a decision that would be studied by xenobiologists and military strategists for generations to come. She walked directly toward the Deathbringer, stopping just outside what she estimated to be the creature's personal space. Hello, she said simply, offering the universal open-palm gesture of peaceful intent. My name is Sarah. We're not here to hurt you or take your home. We just want to live here peacefully. The Deathbringer stared down at this tiny creature that showed no fear of her massive claws or deadly fangs. For the first time in her long life, she felt something she had never experienced before, the desire to retreat. Every instinct told her that these humans were dangerous in ways her species had never encountered. But instead of backing away, she did something equally unprecedented. She lowered her massive head until she was at eye level with Dr. Chun and made a sound that her species used only in moments of extreme uncertainty. She whimpered. The sound carried across the clearing and beyond, reaching the approaching Shadow Maws and causing them to slow their advance. In their complex social hierarchy, the Deathbringer's whimper was a signal of submission that none of them had ever heard her make before. Dr. Chin's team watched in amazement as dozens of the galaxy's most feared predators began emerging from the forest, all of them adopting the same uncertain posture as their leader. The humans had expected to face a coordinated attack from an apex predator species. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by creatures that seemed genuinely afraid of them. Captain, Dr. Chin spoke into her comm unit, never taking her eyes off the Deathbringer. I need you to contact the Galactic Council immediately. Tell them we need to have a serious conversation about their threat assessment protocols. Above the planet, Council observation vessels recorded every moment of the unprecedented encounter. Ambassador Zexhai watched the transmissions with growing disbelief as the galaxy's most feared predators displayed behavior that contradicted every established theory about their species. This is impossible, muttered one of the Council observers. Shadow Maws don't show submission to any species. They're apex predators. Zexhai's three eyes focused intently on the humans below. Perhaps, he said quietly, we need to reconsider which species is truly the apex predator in this encounter. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been extended for the third consecutive day, with delegates arriving from across the galaxy to witness the unprecedented footage from Kepler 442. The holographic displays showed continuous feeds of humans and shadow moths coexisting in ways that challenged every fundamental assumption about predator-prey relationships. High Chancellor Vortha's crystalline form flickered with agitation as she addressed the assembly. The implications of what we're witnessing cannot be overstated. If the shadow moths are indeed exhibiting submissive behavior toward humans, we must completely reassess our understanding of both species. On the planet's surface, Dr. Chun had spent the past week establishing the foundations of what would later be called the Kepler Protocols. Her team had documented over 300 individual shadow moths, each displaying varying degrees of caution around human colonists. The creatures had not abandoned their territories, but they had begun avoiding areas where humans were active. The breakthrough came when Dr. Chun discovered that shadow moths possessed an evolutionary trait that had been completely overlooked by previous researchers. Their ability to sense emotions was not just a hunting adaptation. It was a survival mechanism designed to identify and avoid apex predators from their own evolutionary past. The genetic markers are unmistakable, Dr. Chun explained to Captain Martinez during their daily briefing. Shadow moths evolved on a world where they weren't always the dominant species. Their fear-sensing ability originally developed to help them avoid even more dangerous predators. Captain Martinez studied the data streaming across his display. Are you suggesting that humans somehow trigger this ancient survival response? Sarah nodded, her excitement evident despite days of minimal sleep. It's more than that. I think humans represent something that shadow moths' genetic memory recognizes as a threat so significant that their entire behavioral matrix shifts into avoidance mode. The evidence supporting her theory continued to mount. Shadow moths that came within 50 meters of human settlements would immediately alter their hunting patterns, often abandoning prey they had been tracking for days. More remarkably, they had begun displaying protective behavior towards smaller creatures in areas where humans were present, as if the presence of a perceived superpredator made all other species potential allies. Meanwhile, the human colonization effort proceeded with an ease that astonished both the colonists and their council observers. Infrastructure that would normally require months to establish was completed in weeks, thanks to the complete absence of predator interference. The shadow moths not only avoided human work sites, but seemed to actively discourage other dangerous wildlife from approaching. Lieutenant Morrison discovered this protective behavior during a routine survey mission. His team had been mapping mineral deposits near the colony's eastern border when they encountered a pack of razorfangs, smaller but highly aggressive predators that typically hunted in coordinated groups. Contact, 12 o'clock, Morrison whispered into his comm as the razorfangs began surrounding his team. 6 individuals, standard pack hunting formation. Before the humans could respond, a thunderous roar echoed through the forest. The Deathbringer emerged from the tree-line, her massive form blocking the razorfang's advance. She didn't attack the smaller predators. Instead, she positioned herself between them and the humans, making it clear that the territory was under her protection. The razorfangs retreated immediately, their own instincts recognizing the futility of challenging a shadow moth. The Deathbringer watched them disappear into the forest before turning to face Morrison's team. She studied the humans for a long moment, then made a sound that Dr. Chen's linguistic analysis would later classify as a warning, not to the humans, but to any other predators in the area. "Did that shadow moth just protect us?" asked Private Kowalski, lowering his weapon as the massive creature disappeared back into the forest. Morrison shook his head in amazement. "I think it did. Command, you're not going to believe this report." Back at the colony, Dr. Chun was making even more remarkable discoveries. Her analysis of shadow moth vocalizations revealed a complex communication system that included specific sound patterns for describing different types of threats. Most intriguingly, they had developed entirely new vocalizations for discussing humans. Sounds that seemed to combine their traditional danger warnings with concepts that had no equivalent in their previous vocabulary. They're trying to categorize us, she explained to the assembled research team. But their language doesn't have words for what we represent to them. Imagine trying to describe a nuclear weapon to someone who has never seen anything more advanced than a stone axe. The linguistic breakthrough came when Dr. Chun realized that shadow moths were using mathematical concepts in their communication about humans. The same numerical patterns they had responded to during first contact were appearing in their conversations with each other, but modified in ways that suggested abstract thinking. Working with the colony's computer systems, she developed a basic translation matrix that could interpret simple shadow moth communications. The results were both fascinating and humbling. "They're calling us the unknown hunters," she reported during her weekly transmission to the Galactic Council. But the term carries implications of respect and fear that suggest they view us as beings from outside their normal understanding of the natural world. Ambassador Zexhai listened to the report with growing concern. The Galactic Council had built their understanding of interspecies relations on carefully established hierarchies based on military power, technological advancement, and territorial control. The idea that a species could inspire such profound behavioral changes through presence alone was deeply unsettling. Dr. Chun, he transmitted back to the planet. "Have you been able to determine why humans specifically trigger this response? Are there any physiological or biochemical factors that might explain the shadow moth's reaction?" Sarah had been anticipating this question. "We've identified several possibilities, but the most likely explanation involves human evolutionary history. Our species developed as pursuit hunters on a world filled with megafauna. We possess a combination of traits that shadow moths' genetic memory associates with their most ancient and feared natural enemies." She highlighted specific data points on her transmission. "Humans have binocular vision for tracking prey, persistence hunting capabilities, tool used for killing at a distance, and, most importantly, pack coordination that allows us to take down creatures much larger than ourselves. To a shadow moth's instincts, we represent the perfect evolutionary nightmare." The implications were staggering. If humans triggered such profound responses in the galaxy's most feared predators, what did that suggest about their potential impact on other species? The Council had admitted humans based on their technological achievements and military capabilities, but they had never considered the psychological and evolutionary factors that might make humanity a dominant force in galactic affairs. On Kepler 442, the human colonists were beginning to experience the benefits of their unexpected relationship with the shadow moths. Settlements that should have required massive defensive fortifications were thriving with minimal protection. The shadow moths had essentially turned the entire planet into a protected territory, driving away or controlling other predator species while maintaining a respectful distance from human activities. But Dr. Chun was beginning to suspect that their presence was having even more far-reaching effects. Her long-range biological scans indicated that the entire planetary ecosystem was shifting in response to humanity's arrival. Herbivore populations were increasing in human-settled areas, plant growth was accelerating, and even the planet's smaller predator species were displaying behavioral changes that suggested a fundamental restructuring of the food chain. "We're not just coexisting with the shadow moths," she confided to Captain Martinez during their evening briefing. "We're accidentally terraforming this entire world through our mere presence." The captain studied the ecological data with growing amazement. "How is that possible? We've only been here for 3 weeks." Sarah gestured toward the window, where they could see shadow moths moving through the forest in the distance, their massive forms visible against the setting sun. Fear is one of the most powerful forces in nature. When apex predators start avoiding certain areas, it creates opportunities for every other species in the ecosystem. We've essentially created safe zones that are allowing the entire planetary biosphere to restructure itself. As night fell over the colony, the sounds of the forest carried a new quality. The aggressive roars and hunting calls that had characterized the planet's nights for millions of years have been replaced by more peaceful sounds. The calls of prey species that no longer needed a hide, the rustling of vegetation that could grow without constant trampling, and, underneath it all, the distant vocalizations of shadow maws discussing the presence of the strange new beings that had changed their world forever. None of them knew that their transformation of Kepler 442 was being watched with growing alarm by civilizations across the galaxy, many of whom were beginning to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake in admitting humanity to the Galactic Council. The revelation came not from Dr. Chen's research, but from an unexpected source. The Deathbringer had been approaching the human settlement's perimeter for 7 consecutive nights, each time moving closer before retreating into the forest. On the 8th night, she crossed the invisible boundary that separated the wild territory from the human-claimed zone. Sensor alarms throughout the colony activated as the massive shadow maw entered the settlement's outer ring. Security teams prepared for evacuation protocols, but Dr. Chen countermanded the orders before they could be implemented. "Stand down," she transmitted over the general comm system. "She's not hunting. Look at her posture. She's approaching as a supplicant, not a predator." The Deathbringer moved slowly through the colony's streets, her massive form dwarfing the prefabricated buildings, but taking care not to damage anything in her path. Colonists watched from windows and doorways as the galaxy's most feared apex predator made her way toward the research center with deliberate, almost ceremonial steps. She stopped outside Dr. Chen's laboratory and lowered herself to the ground, adopting a position that human observers would later describe as a cross between submission and reverence. Then, she began to vocalize, but not in the mathematical patterns they had established during first contact. These sounds were deeper, more complex, and carried emotional resonances that seemed to transcend species boundaries. Dr. Chun emerged from the building slowly, her hands visible and empty of any tools or weapons. The Deathbringer's massive head turned to track her movement, but the shadow maw remained in her submissive position. "Hello, old friend," Sarah said quietly, using the same tone she would employ with a frightened animal. "What brings you to our home?" The Deathbringer's response was unlike anything previously recorded. She began projecting a series of mental images directly into Dr. Chen's consciousness, a capability that no previous research had identified. The images were fragmentary, but clear: ancient landscapes, other creatures of immense size and power, and scenes of violence that seemed to span geological ages. Dr. Chun staggered as her mind processed the psychic communication. The images were memories, she realized, but not personal ones. They were genetic memories, evolutionary echoes that had been passed down through millions of years of shadow maw development. "Captain Martinez," she whispered into her comm unit, "I need you to see this. She's showing me their history." The images continued to flow, each one revealing more about the true nature of shadow maw evolution. They had indeed once been prey species, but not to creatures from their own world. The predators that had shaped their development came from elsewhere, beings that had visited their planet in the distant past and left such a profound impact on the local ecosystem that even now, millions of years later, their presence was remembered at a cellular level. The final image was the most shocking of all: the silhouettes of creatures that bore an unmistakable resemblance to humans. Bipedal, tool-using, pack-hunting beings that had stalked shadow maw ancestors across primordial landscapes with a persistence and intelligence that had fundamentally altered the course of evolution on their world. Dr. Chen's legs gave out as the full implications hit her. She sat down heavily on the laboratory steps, staring up at the Deathbringer with newfound understanding. "You remember us," she whispered. "Not humans specifically, but what we represent. Your species evolved to fear us because our kind was here before." The Deathbringer's response was a sound that conveyed acknowledgement, relief, and something that might have been gratitude. She had finally found someone who could understand the terror that had haunted her species for so long. Captain Martinez arrived at the scene with a security detail, but stopped short when he saw Dr. Chun sitting peacefully beside the massive predator. "Dr. Chun, what's your status?" "I'm fine, Captain. Better than fine. We've just solved one of the galaxy's greatest mysteries." She gestured toward the Deathbringer, who was now resting in a position that resembled a sleeping cat more than a lethal predator. The Shadowmaws aren't afraid of us because we're dangerous. They're afraid of us because we're familiar. She explained the psychic communication and its implications while the Deathbringer remained nearby, occasionally adding her own vocalizations to clarify or expand on certain points. The picture that emerged revolutionized humanity's understanding of their place in the galaxy. Earth wasn't the only world that early humans visited, Dr. Chun concluded. Our species has been exploring space far longer than we realized, and we left our mark on civilizations across the galaxy. The Shadowmaw's genetic memory is just the most obvious example. The news spread rapidly through both the human colony and the galactic communication networks. Within hours, xenobiologists across the galaxy were reporting similar findings from their own studies of supposedly hostile alien fauna. Species after species showed behavioral anomalies when exposed to humans, not because humanity was particularly threatening, but because human presence triggered ancient memories of previous contact. The Galactic Council's emergency session became a permanent assembly as delegates grappled with the implications. If humans have been active in galactic affairs for millions of years before achieving modern spaceflight, what other evidence of their presence might be waiting to be discovered? Ambassador Zexhai found himself at the center of increasingly heated debates about humanity's true status within the galactic community. The species they had reluctantly admitted as newcomers were now revealed to be potentially the oldest spacefaring civilization in known space. The archaeological implications alone are staggering, reported Dr. Van from the Galactic Archaeological Institute during one of the emergency sessions. If humans were capable of interstellar travel millions of years ago, we need to re-examine every ancient site in the galaxy. But the most immediate concerns were political and strategic. Several member species were demanding immediate restrictions on human expansion, fearing that humanity's presence might trigger unpredictable responses from other supposedly understood alien ecosystems. Others argued for accelerated integration, hoping to benefit from humanity's apparent ability to pacify dangerous predator species. On Kepler 442, Dr. Chun continued her work with growing amazement. The Deathbringer had become a permanent resident of the human settlement, serving as both protector and translator. Through their psychic communication, she was learning to understand not just Shadowmaw society, but the broader ecological patterns that govern life on Deathworlds across the galaxy. The Shadowmaws are just one example, she explained during her latest report to Earth. Every Deathworld in the galaxy shows evidence of human influence in its evolutionary development. We didn't just spread across the stars, we shaped them. The Deathbringer's presence had also begun attracting other Shadowmaws to the settlement. Within 2 weeks, nearly 100 of the massive predators had taken up residence in the surrounding forest, creating an unprecedented concentration of apex predators that somehow managed to coexist peacefully. Private Jackson, who had initially been terrified of the Shadowmaws, now found himself serving as an unofficial liaison between the creatures and the human colonists. "They're not what we expected," he reported to his family back on Earth. "They're intelligent, curious, and they seem genuinely grateful that we're here. Yesterday, one of them brought me a dead razor fong as a gift." The transformation of Kepler 442 continued to accelerate. The planet that had been classified as uninhabitable was becoming a model for interspecies cooperation. Human settlements were expanding rapidly, but always in consultation with their Shadowmaw protectors. Mining operations were conducted with Shadowmaw guidance to avoid disturbing important ecosystems. Agricultural development proceeded with their assistance in identifying the best locations for crop cultivation. Most remarkably, the Shadowmaws had begun displaying behaviors that suggested they were learning from human examples. They started using tools, simple ones at first, but with increasing sophistication. They developed new hunting strategies that minimized ecological impact. Some even began attempting to domesticate smaller creatures, mimicking human agricultural practices. Dr. Chen watched these developments with a mixture of pride and concern. "We're not just coexisting with them," she confided to Captain Martinez. "We're inadvertently accelerating their evolution. The Shadow Maws are becoming more than they were before we arrived." The captain studied the latest behavioral reports with growing unease. Is that necessarily a good thing? What happens when apex predators start developing technology? Before Dr. Chen could respond, her communication console activated with an urgent transmission from the Galactic Council. Ambassador Zexhai's image appeared on the screen, his three eyes focused intently on her. "Dr. Chen," he began without preamble, "we need your team to cease all interaction with the Shadow Maws immediately. Several member species have reported similar behavioral changes in their own dangerous fauna following exposure to human presence. We may be looking at a galaxy-wide ecological disruption." Dr. Chen looked through her laboratory window, where the Deathbringer was teaching a group of younger Shadow Maws to arrange stones in mathematical patterns. The sight filled her with a sense of profound responsibility. Humanity had returned to the stars to find that their ancient presence still echoed through countless worlds. Now they faced the challenge of determining what their role should be in shaping the future of galactic civilization. Dr. Chen stared at Ambassador Zexhai's image on her communication screen, feeling the weight of an impossible decision settling on her shoulders. Behind her, through the laboratory window, she could see the Deathbringer working with her students, teaching them concepts that their species had never needed to learn. The peaceful sounds of a transformed ecosystem drifted through the air, a testament to what interspecies cooperation could achieve. "Ambassador," she began carefully, "I understand the Council's concerns, but I don't think you fully comprehend what we've discovered here. The Shadow Maws aren't just reacting to our presence. They're remembering who they used to be before millions of years of genetic trauma shaped them into isolated apex predators." Zexhai's crystalline form flickered with agitation. "Dr. Chen, we have reports from 17 different worlds where human presence has triggered unprecedented behavioral changes in native fauna. The Corvin hegemony is reporting that their war beast breeding programs have completely collapsed because the creatures refuse to fight when humans are present. The Xian Empire's military has requested immediate human evacuation from their border worlds because their guardian creatures have abandoned their posts." Captain Martinez joined the conversation, his expression grim. "Dr. Chen, I'm receiving similar reports from Fleet Command. They're calling it the pacification effect. Apparently, every world where humans have established permanent settlements is experiencing massive ecological shifts." Sarah turned to look at the Deathbringer, who had paused in her teaching to watch the conversation. The ancient Shadow Maws' enhanced senses had undoubtedly detected the tension in the human voices, and her massive form radiated concern. "What if that's not a problem?" Dr. Chen asked suddenly. "What if the pacification effect is exactly what the galaxy needs?" Both Zexhai and Captain Martinez began to respond, but she held up her hand for silence. "Think about it. How many wars have been fought over Deathworld resources that no one could safely extract? How many species have been wiped out by predators they couldn't understand or control? How many colonies have failed because of hostile fauna?" She gestured toward the thriving settlement visible through her window. "In 3 weeks, we've transformed one of the most dangerous worlds in the galaxy into a paradise. The Shadow Maws are safer because they no longer have to hunt constantly to survive. The smaller species are thriving because they're not constantly being hunted. The ecosystem is more balanced than it's been in millions of years." Ambassador Zexhai's 3 eyes focused intently on her. "And what happens when these transformed predators decide they no longer need human guidance? What happens when a species with the physical capabilities of Shadow Maws and the intelligence you've been fostering decides to expand beyond their homeworld?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Dr. Chen looked again at the Deathbringer, whose ancient eyes seemed to hold depths of wisdom that transcended species boundaries. Through their psychic link, she could sense the Shadow Maw's understanding of the conversation and her own concern about the implications. "Permission to speak freely?" Dr. Chen asked Captain Martinez, who nodded grimly. The galaxy is afraid, she said bluntly. Every species in the Council is terrified of change because they've built their civilizations on the assumption that dangerous worlds are unlivable and dangerous creatures are uncontrollable. Humanity challenges those assumptions simply by existing. She activated her holographic display, showing ecological data from Kepler 442. Look at these numbers. Biodiversity is up 30%. Atmospheric oxygen has increased due to reduced plant damage. Carbon absorption has improved because herbivore populations are properly managing vegetation growth. We haven't just made this world safe, we've made it healthier. Ambassador Zexhai studied the data with growing unease. The ecological benefits are undeniable. But the political implications are that the galaxy has been wrong about almost everything, Dr. Chen interrupted. Wrong about Deathworlds, wrong about apex predators, and wrong about humanity's role in galactic civilization. Captain Martinez cleared his throat. Dr. Chun, I need to inform you that Fleet Command has issued preliminary orders for evacuation of all human settlements on worlds classified as having dangerous indigenous fauna. The order will become official in 72 hours unless the situation is resolved. Before Dr. Chun could respond, a new presence entered the conversation. The Deathbringer approached the communication console and lowered her massive head until she was visible on the screen. Her intelligence was unmistakable as she studied Ambassador Zexhai with the same intensity that the alien diplomat was directing at her. Then, she did something that shocked everyone present. She spoke in perfectly clear, if heavily accented, galactic standard. Ambassador, the Deathbringer said, her deep voice carrying harmonics that resonated through the building. Your fear is understood, but unnecessary. The silence that followed was deafening. Zexhai's three eyes widened in disbelief, while Captain Martinez reached for his sidearm before thinking better of it. Dr. Chun found her voice first. How long have you been able to speak standard? The Deathbringer's massive head tilted slightly. Learning began when Seraphin first spoke mathematics. Understanding grew with each conversation. Speaking required courage. Ambassador Zexhai leaned forward, his diplomatic training warring with his instinctive fear. You've been learning our language by listening to our communications? Yes. Also learning about galaxy beyond sky. Many worlds. Many peoples. Much fear of Shadow Maw kind. The Deathbringer's voice carried a sadness that transcended species. Fear unnecessary. Shadow Maws remember old pain, old terror. Humans help remember also old peace. She gestured with one massive claw toward the settlement outside. Before humans, Shadow Maws hunt alone, trust none, know only hunger and territory. Ancient memory said this was survival. But ancient memory also holds different knowing. The Deathbringer's explanation continued, revealing the depth of understanding that had developed between the species. The Shadow Maws had indeed been solitary apex predators, but only because their genetic trauma had forced them into that role. Their natural state, before the ancient catastrophe that had shaped their evolution, had been as cooperative pack hunters who formed complex social bonds. Humans trigger old memory of cooperation, she explained. Not memory of being hunted, but memory of hunting together. Memory of partnership between intelligence and strength. Dr. Chun felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The ancient humans who visited your world. They weren't predators hunting your ancestors. They were partners. Yes, together hunting, together surviving, together building. The Deathbringer's voice carried a note of longing. Then came the darkness time. Fire from sky. Partners went to stars, promised to return. Shadow Maws waited. Forgot how to wait. Forgot partnership. Remembered only survival. Ambassador Zexhai struggled to process this revelation. Are you saying that humans and Shadow Maws were allies in the distant past? More than allies, the Deathbringer replied. Family of choice. Humans brought sky knowledge. Shadow Maws brought world strength. Together, both grew beyond what either could become alone. The implications were staggering. If humanity's ancient civilization had formed symbiotic relationships with apex predators across the galaxy, then the current pacification effect wasn't humans domesticating dangerous species. It was the restoration of prehistoric partnerships that had been lost to cosmic catastrophe. Dr. Chen activated her recording equipment. This changes everything. If we can prove that humans and galactic fauna were partners rather than competitors, it completely reframes the debate about human expansion. Captain Martinez nodded slowly. It also explains why human presence has such a profound calming effect. We're not imposing our will on these creatures. We're reuniting with lost family. The Deathbringer's massive head bobbed in agreement. Other worlds have other partners waiting. Different shapes, different strengths, but same ancient bond. Galaxy fears human return because Galaxy forgot what cooperation means. Ambassador Zexhai remained silent for several long moments, processing the implications of this revelation. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that reflected the magnitude of the decision facing the Galactic Council. If what you're telling us is true, then humanity isn't just another member species. You're potentially the key to unlocking cooperative relationships with every dangerous predator species in the galaxy. Not just predators, Dr. Chen corrected. If our archaeological evidence is correct, ancient humans formed partnerships with representatives of dozens of different evolutionary niches. The dangerous species aren't an exception. They're the survivors of a galactic civilization that we helped build. The Deathbringer rose to her full height, her massive form somehow conveying both dignity and hope. Council of Many Worlds has choice. Continue old ways of fear and separation, or choose new ways of remembering and reunion. She gestured toward the window, where humans and shadow maws could be seen working together on expanding the settlement. Kepler World shows what is possible. Not conquest, not control, partnership, growth, future. Ambassador Zexhai closed his three eyes and was silent for nearly a minute. When he reopened them, his expression had changed from fear to something approaching wonder. Dr. Chun, Captain Martinez, he said formally, I am suspending the evacuation order pending a full council review of your findings. I suspect we are about to enter a new chapter in galactic history. As the communication ended, Dr. Chen looked out at the transformed world that surrounded them. In the distance, shadow maws and humans worked side by side, rebuilding not just a colony, but the foundations of a civilization that had been lost among the stars for millions of years. The galaxy was about to remember what it meant when different species chose cooperation over conquest, understanding over fear, and partnership over dominion. The age of humanity's return had begun, and, with it, the restoration of bonds that had once connected every world under the galactic sky.